she was grabbing your hands. Like, it's not that humans touch each other.
Both hands? Sonny, if a stranger grabbed both of your hands, how would you react to that?
I don't like to be touched. I am not I don't like it. Like, I barely tolerate it when my children give me hugs.
Hello and welcome to the Bulwark's Next Level podcast. I'm your host, Tim Miller, with my longtime BFFs. We used to be in an office together even, Sarah Longwell and Sonny Bunch, who is in for JVL today. Guys, before I get to you, we have a live show in DC on Thursday. This is your last chance. Sign up for that. Get tickets. Tickets are running low. Come hang out with us.
I don't think we have many left. We've got like 20.
Yeah,
I know. So we're going to have a good time. As for this podcast, I've been noticing you guys have been falling down on your job on commenting on the Spotify and Apple apps. So, go in there, give us a review, give us a rate, talk about how I'm your favorite member of the trio, etc., etc. While we're on reviews of the podcast, really quick before we get to our topics, I did Pod Save America live in New Orleans on Friday. I was a little tipsy, which you might notice if you listen to it. But one interesting piece of feedback I got, it was a little bit of a good news, bad news situation. Those boys are loyal listeners of The Next Level, even over other political podcasts like that their boss does, like their former boss does a political podcast that people talk about. They listen to us instead. So loyal listeners, which is nice. Bad news is they don't like the name. Don't like the name. Mentioned it live on stage that they don't like the name and they want us to reconsider renaming The Next Level in 2024. John Lovett, maybe this says some more about John Lovett than about the podcast. I don't know, but he's like, I always forget it and it's hard to Google. He's like Tim Miller Cuck podcast, and so anyway, something to pray on. Sarah Longwell podcast. Then you get the focus group. So just something to pray on. I'm not saying we change it. I'm always open to constructive feedback from loyal listeners, even if they are neoliberal shills with a competitor podcast.
Wait, hold on. That is interesting. Do they have a suggestion? Because if you recall, when we were trying to pick a name, this was like just the one we could all agree on because it was so benign. Like we couldn't. I forget what we wanted. I wanted to call it like the right stuff or something, and you hated that because you didn't want to be not. All right, so great. We'll take suggestions, not just criticism.
Yeah, we'll take we'll take feedback in the comments. Okay. On to the news. We've got Tim Scott did drop out of the race. We're not going to lead with that. That's not a Block A topic. But for people who are dying to get our takes about Tim Scott, that will be coming. What I wanted to start with was Jonathan Martin, friend of the Bulwark, wrote a column yesterday in Politico that was not well received in Biden world. Let's just be clear. That listed all of the, bedwetting political strategists' anonymous advice that he could hoover up for Joe Biden, and kind of ran through all of it, all the things that Democratic strategists who still want to be invited to the White House Christmas party, so won't say it on the record, complain about, all the things that they want from Joe Biden. I love J-Mart, to be honest. I thought it was a little overwrought, the column, but I thought the concept was interesting, and it might be, we're just over 1 year out from the election. Might be a good way to start, to use that as a prompt maybe, and all of us could give our one piece of pro bono advice to Joe Biden as he stares down the barrel of just a fucking rematch with Donald Trump for some reason, which we're gonna get to next. So who wants to go first? We've not prepped. I don't know what your guys' advice is going to be. I know what mine is. I'm a little concerned me and Sarah have the same advice, actually, so I'm like frantically trying to think of a backup. But
okay.
I'll let one of you guys
go. Yeah, Sarah should go first then.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
to make sure. Because my piece of advice has remained the same the entire time. When I was on with Jen Psaki, the thing I was really pressing her on was not why isn't Biden out there more, but why don't they have more surrogates, right? Like the one thing that they should be doing is they now have this bench. A really good bench, right? They've got their Whitmers, they got their Shapiros, they got Wes Moore, they got Abigail Spanberger, Alyssa Slotkin, Mikey Sherrill, all these like women who were CIA agents and
gubernatorial candidate
pilots.
Abigail Spanberger, by the way. Congrats to friend of the pod, Abigail Spanberger, run for governor of Virginia.
And so this seems to me like a huge missed opportunity for them to put both a younger face on the party, to give people a sense of what the future of the Democratic Party could be, and to have people out there selling Biden's agenda. And I've always wondered, like why this isn't happening already? And is it because these people don't want to carry water for Biden? Is it because Biden is not inviting them into it? And this is one of the things that in the piece, Jay Mark kind of hit on that made it sound like the big problem is the White House isn't asking for this. And that if the White House was asking, hey guys, like, let's all have a meeting at the White House. Let's talk about, how to go out and sell the agenda. Like, that seems to me to be the lowest hanging fruit. And the only person who does it really is Gavin Newsom, right?
Who's not being asked. He's inviting himself to the party.
Right. He's inviting himself. But that's good. I mean, and I don't particularly care for Gavin Newsom, but when he goes and fights with Sean Hannity about Biden's like energy policy or whatever, that helps both Biden and Gavin. And so these are win-wins, and why people aren't availing themselves of it, I don't understand.
Just really quick on Gavin. He's been pretty good as a surrogate. I also don't like him, though. His press conference yesterday where he was like, yes, we're cleaning up the homeless because the world leaders are coming to town in the same way you clean up your house for guests. That was not really the best. That was really bad, actually. That's bad. They should have workshopped that a little bit more. Anyway, so Gavin's not batting 100.
Should live among the needles.
Yeah, you, the plebes, should have to jump over people doing fentanyl on the street. But if Chairman Xi comes to town, it will be gold-plated roads for as long as I can see. Sonny, I have some thoughts on Sarah's suggestion, Sonny. But what's your take on that? Do you think that matters? Is that a difference maker?
I don't know. I think it couldn't hurt. I'll put it that way. If you're not going to have Biden out there doing press conferences every day, and I wouldn't. He's got more important things to worry about. You need to have the surrogates out there, and it is interesting, this idea that they just simply aren't asking. I would find that almost shocking. I feel like that's very basic, like, maintenance of the presidency stuff. But I mean, like, it couldn't hurt. It couldn't hurt to have friendly faces out there making the rounds, doing the talking points.
Yeah, my take on this, and I basically agree with Sarah, and this was, if it wasn't Sarah's advice, this was going to be mine, but I have another piece of advice, is I don't know if it's so much surrogates, like, writ large, per se, as I kind of want, like, one head surrogate. Right, that would be my piece of advice, and like I think that this in theory could have been Kamala. Clearly, like, this is not in her wheelhouse. I actually think Kamala's maligned, and there are other things that they could be using her to do. But they need somebody that can carry the case against Trump, that has the gravitas to get on the shows, to make news, somebody that people know is in Biden's ear, a trusted person. I mean, J Mart had Rahm in the past. Just really quick, I think I forgot to mention this. If folks are looking to read the story, it's Here's How Biden Can Turn It Around in Politico. J Mart had Rahm as the head picture there. Somebody like Rahm, right? Like, if you had a chief, like, Jeff Zients seems to be doing a great job. I have nothing against him, but I almost feel like Biden could use an inside chief of staff and an outside chief of staff, all right? Or a campaign manager, somebody that, like, Rahm can, when Donald Trump calls people vermin, Rahm can be on all the shows the next day and be like, this is like Hitler, this is outrageous, right? So Biden doesn't have to do it. Kamala isn't the one to do it. But, if you had Chris Murphy go out and talk about that, that's better than nothing. I agree that's better than nothing. But I think that the way to really elevate it would be to kind of name somebody that people know and see and are like, okay, this person represents Biden administration, and they're good at that. He hasn't really had that the whole time, I guess, since Psaki, really. I mean, maybe it's time to get Psaki off MSNBC, give me that slot, and like put her back in the game. But I don't think she wants to do that. But since Psaki, he hasn't. KJP is just not that good at that. The chief of staffs, Ron Klain, was good at it on Twitter, but like that's not enough, right? And Pete, again, we could have moved Pete to be the secretary of offense instead of secretary of transportation. I don't know, but that would be my advice. It's related to yours, Sarah.
Yeah, but can I just say, number one, I just don't think one person's enough. I mean, I don't want to get into the semantics of it with you, but like, I do think one of the big problems for the Biden administration that's been sort of obvious the whole time is that they don't have a robust communication strategy that is offensive. And they're doing things like the Bidenomics thing was getting really trashed in this piece. And the thing about Bidenomics, like, I think the line was like, pick it up and put it in the trash can. The problem with the Bidenomics thing is that they branded it before they sold it, right? Before You didn't want to put his name on it until you convinced people the economy was turning around.
Right.
And so, like, while people still thought the economy was bad, they branded it, and that was a mistake. But part of the reason that they have trouble getting the narrative is that they just can't, what is the Bannon line? Now, Bannon's flood the zone with shit, but these guys can't flood the zone sort of with their own people.
Candy.
Yeah.
Flood the zone with...
Anyway.
Yeah.
But this is where the sort of, I think there were some individual pieces of advice I thought were like, okay, maybe like send the Clintons to solve the Mideast crisis. Like, okay.
Yeah, and some of it was like stuff that's obviously going to happen in the future. Like Liz Cheney, get her to endorse you. It's like, what, you don't think that's not on their list? Like, guys,
yeah, right.
Like, is that really the best time for that, really? November 2023?
But the big piece of advice, the overarching, was like, get on war footing now. Like, if the stakes are so high, like, let's get on war footing. And I think that's the piece that they need to take seriously, or the part that I thought was like, yes, this is the problem, is everybody continues to operate like we're in a normal political environment, and we are not in a normal political environment. Sorry, Sonny, go ahead.
All right, no. I was moving on to Sonny's piece of advice, unless you had another thing. All right, Sonny, advice number 2. Advice number 1, more surrogates. Advice number 2 from Sonny Bunch.
Number 2 is stay the course on Israel. I mean, the polling on this is exceptionally clear. The support for Israel has ticked up in every category between June and October. There was a poll that Brookings was highlighting, the lean toward Israel numbers for Democrats, if you're worried about shoring up the base, went from 13.7% support to 30.9% support. Independents went from 20.8% support to 37.9% support. Republicans ticked up too.
This is a net number, right? Not a total. Like it's like 37%.
That's the total. So I mean, it's plus 17 with Democrats, plus 17 with independents. I mean, like the support for the Palestinian and Hamas cause is always very low in America and has ticked down. I just feel like it's such a and this gets to the broader big strength that Biden has, which is as the defender of the American-led international order, which, you highlight Trump, agent of chaos. Who knows what he's going to do? He could throw Ukraine under the bus. He could throw Israel under the bus. Nobody actually has any idea what he will do. As opposed to Biden, which is just like fairly steadily maintaining the American support for democracy and our allies abroad. And again, that gets to both just his biggest overall strength, stability, normal Biden. And it also shores up support amongst, I think, what was often I think, maybe I'm wrong, Sarah, on this, but I get the sense that would also help shore up support with security voters, like college-educated women. I don't know. I feel like that's you go out there and you say,
you're Atlanta suburbs guy.
We're going to protect people from terrorists. We are going to get our hostages back who are still being held by Hamas. Like that is the angle I take with this. And I think look, for all the big showy protests, for all the noise out in the internet and people marching in the streets, the polling is very, very clear on this. The support for the Palestinian cause is minuscule. And they should not be worried about those people.
Well, you mean the support for like stopping? Like I think there's plenty of support for humanitarian support. And if you look at the numbers, it says this. It's like that people. Right. People hold two thoughts in their head at the same time, right? Like that they can feel like we could be doing more, even from on the humanitarian side. With the people in Gaza that are going through a horrible time, but that doesn't mean telling Israel they should stop defending themselves and we should give up on the hostages, etc. I predicted both of your guys' prediction, by the way. I thought Sonny's was going to be start a new war, but I was on this. But stay the course on an existing war. It was pretty
focus
close
on the war you got in hand.
Pretty close. I will say this: the one thing I don't. I guess I have one agreement with Sonny and one slight disagreement. I'm interested in your take on, Sarah. On the agreement, I do think that there's an over panic right now about the youth vote and youth turnout. And I know that Biden wasn't on the ballot, but if you look at the Virginia, I just saw last night somebody did an analysis of the Virginia college town numbers, and it was off the charts for Democrats. Now I know that this was local election, so it wasn't really Israel, but like you feel like you would have seen something, right? Like you would have seen some bleed at UVA, Virginia Tech, like these places. It was, but they hit their numbers on turnout. They hit their numbers on the vote share, Democrat versus Republican. Liberty University was the one college town where that was not the case. You'll be surprised to hear there was an inversion of this story in Lynchburg. I think the Democrats got about 5% in that precinct. So God bless those kids. I don't know. I don't know if their parents have locked them in the dorms there, or what's happening for the 5% of Democrats at Liberty. But so I think that I'm a little less concerned about that. I don't. I think things could get ugly though by next year, and I'm less. I'm less sure that the American people are going to want us to be totally tied to whatever BB and whatever this government is doing over there. And so I'm less assured in your position that blind, unwavering support looks as good next year as it does this year. But anyway, I don't know. What do you say, Sarah? The other option is maybe nobody cares about this and this doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would like disaggregate the sort of moral questions from the political questions. And so like if we disaggregate those and we just take the political questions, the question is like, does this allow Biden to look presidential and steady and like he's handling big things that presidents do?
That's a good point.
And I would say in this moment, it is giving him that. And so, and to your point, Tim, like, God knows if JVL was here, who we miss very much. But if JVL was here, he would probably take the dark version. We could also take the optimistic version, which is that these things are resolved. That somehow we have a resolution in Israel. We have a resolution of some kind between Russia and Ukraine, which could be huge for Biden, right?
I just don't. How could that possibly be?
Well,
this is
I mean,
really
it is a
Sarah
year.
getting high on the optimism juice. I mean,
no, I know. I think that the Israel one, and so this is not, as I always stipulate, this is not my area of expertise, but I guess I think that at least the Israel conflict could be something that is resolved-ish, if nothing else, that Israel goes hard and then it's over.
Israel.
It's like
Israel also has no interest in occupying Gaza. Like they don't want to like keep troops there forever. They want to get their people back. They want to degrade Hamas to the greatest extent possible, and then. But I can't imagine a situation in which Israel is putting tens of thousands of troops in Gaza for an extended period of time.
I can imagine it.
Maybe.
And I don't know. I'm on the dark side of this. I'm very it's hard for me to imagine a clean outcome to this.
But can I just say on the young people though, so the other thing though is the reason that people turned out and young people turned out is because of the pro-life, pro-choice stuff, right? Abortion's on the ballot. And I think that this is the thing, the biggest problem with Biden's position on Israel in terms of their young base is their activist base who does work on elections, right? Like those are the people who go knock doors, those are the people who are young and sort of energetic. And so that may cause them a little bit of trouble with their sort of apparatus. But I don't think it's going to cause them trouble in terms of votes because I think people are going to come out and vote on abortion, especially young people.
Yeah, the first time there's a door-knocking skirmish between the college campus Friends of Palestine and then the other people that volunteer for campaigns, which are retired ladies that are doing their knitting while they're doing their phone calls and have their I Support Israel button on. It could get a little intense at the at a door knocking meetup somewhere. But okay, Sonny, I don't know. I appreciate that you are true to your brand. I don't know that is going to be the make or break issue for Joe Biden. Mine is. I feel, and this is I'm a little bit of a broken record on this, but Joe Biden JVL talks and complains a lot about how how the infrastructure bill and all these other pieces of legislation have actually had a positive impact in a lot of red areas, right? There's all these manufacturing plants, that are going up. There's all this investment that's going up in red areas. If I was Joe Biden, I would just spend the entire spring like hanging out in rural Georgia. And I just in my mind's eye, I have that picture of him with his arm around the biker while Ron DeSantis looks sad. And I just want them to put that picture up in the office and be like, how many times can we recreate this picture over the next year? Like, I want Joe Biden hanging out at Harley shops and on factory floors and with union workers of all colors, like in working class neighborhoods in the city, working class neighborhoods in rural areas, and just hang out with and have Scranton Joe in the Trans Am with people that look like they actually work for a living, unlike us, right, and have some calluses on their hands. And I that would just be his entire schedule, and that'd be my North Star. And if that was Carvel's, I don't know, I don't have an "It's the economy, stupid" tagline for it, but I have a picture. So I just want everybody to have the picture up in their office. Yeah.
It's let Joe be Joe. I really agree with this advice. I mean, he should give no speeches. Like, for his campaign, he should just not give speeches, because that's not where he thrives. He thrives and let people come up to him and argue with him, and let him say, "Hey, Jack, I'm gonna fight you on that." Whatever. Let Joe be Joe. And I do think that one of the things also in the J-Mart piece that I think is true is his staff, by not letting him engage in some of the ways that I think he wants to, it gives the impression that they don't trust that he can do it, and they're gonna have to take the leash off. And the safest way to do it is actually just let him do it with people. Just let him loose. Yeah, talking to people in proximity where he can touch them and see him the way he is.
Tactile, not the way Kari Lake tried to touch me, but friendly.
That was so funny.
Receptive touching.
It was funny that you decided to be like, "Why are you touching me?" As though you don't put your hands on everybody. You're so offended by someone putting your hands on you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've never grabbed somebody by both of their hands. I mean, okay, I'm just sorry. Can we just talk about this? Like, it's one thing to touch a shoulder with that has a shirt on it. There is something very creepy about both of my hands were being touched, and also by somebody like Kari Lake. I don't know. I mean, when a loathsome person tries to put skin on skin.
Yeah, was it skin to skin contact?
It was multiple. There were two skin to skin pieces of skin to skin contact. It'd be like if I put my hand on somebody's face, like a grandmother does to a grandchild, and like hey my boy, like both hands on me, and then clasping. I mean, in the moment, I probably said, "Why are you grabbing me?" would maybe have been a better word, because touching is different. But we're doing it live. But it was clasped. Was it let Kari clasp both of your hands, Sarah? You're shaking your hand. You're shaking your head. It's like being in church.
It was. I mean, here's the thing. I thought it was a little performative on your part, right? To be like, "Why are you touching me?" As though she was. We're in our Me Too phase of, are you smelling my hair? What creepy thing are you doing? And she was grabbing your hands. Like, it's not that humans touch each other. I'm pro
Sonny, if a stranger grabbed both of your hands, how would you react to that?
I would. Tim handled that much better than I would have, because I would have jerked away in disgust. I just would have been like, don't touch me. Like, I don't like to be
like this.
I don't like to be touched. I don't like it. Like, I barely tolerate it when my children give me hugs. Like, that's like my level of not liking touching. I really don't like to be touched. And if any politician grabbed both of my hands, or again, I think it's the skin to skin thing, because touching on the shoulders. Okay, you're making, but I thought Tim handled it very calmly.
And as I said, I am a toucher, but it was reminiscent of me for the Catholics out there, like when you have to, when they're doing the Our Father in church, and you have to hold your neighbor's hand in the pew. So something that certain Catholic churches do. So you're not just praying, but you're hand holding, and that always grossed me out. I'm like, your clammy hands are on my hands, like some stranger in church in the morning, and that was what.
So I also don't care for that, but I'll just throw something out there for you guys, which is that maybe it's because you're boys and people don't do this to you all the time. But when you're a girl, people touch you all the time. Men grab your hands all the time. Older men. It's a thing that they do constantly when they're talking to you.
And that sounds gross to me.
Okay, well...
I'm sorry you have to deal with that, actually.
Yeah,
we have a terrible culture.
Okay. Well, I just... Kari Lake grabbing your hands to me, I was just like, that happens to any... If you were talking to an old man politician, they would grab you and put their hands on your shoulders and grabbing your hands. I know exactly what that feels like. People do that all the time. And they do it as a... I know how she was doing it, too. It's as a, I'm making a point here. You stop, you hush while I make the point, and they put their hands on your hands. Yeah. That is a very familiar move that I think.
God, old straight men are gross, I guess. That's one thing we can all agree on. A hug, a little gay hug, kiss on the cheek, the two-hand touching. There's something creepy about it. Okay, if you don't know, I just realized maybe a couple of you live in a cave and don't know what we're talking about. So I'm going to explain in the next segment. Before I do, Sonny, did you have any final thoughts on my idea for Joe Biden? Hang out with bikers.
Yeah, he should. I wish he would say motorcyclists instead of bikers, because bikers there are two different ways bikers. Yeah, and he should stay away from bicyclists. Actually, he should stay far away from bicyclists. But motorcyclists, Harley guys. Yeah, they're fine.
I concur. Okay. If thinking about Kari Lake touching you and thinking about the problems Joe Biden's campaign is having is causing some mental health issues for you, I've got good news. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What is supposed to bring joy and goodwill, but sometimes raises your anxiety and sadness? The holidays. Also for me, going back to standard time. Okay, the 4 o'clock. I've had a horrible week. I've had anxiety throughout my entire body all week, because of the sun setting at 4:32 for some reason, because a handful of Karens are not happy that their kids have to go to the bus stop in the morning in the dark, I guess is why we turn back the clock. I still have no idea.
It's for farmers, Tim. It's for farmers.
It's for farmers. It's the farmers' fault.
Get very angry when you blame it on farmers. For the record, farmers are like, we'll get up whenever. We don't care about this. We just get up and do our work. I don't know whose
fault it is. I apologize to the Karens. I don't know whose fault it is. Needless to say, this time of year, when we have to turn the clocks back and we have the specter of Christmas coming on, it can be a lot. And that's why adding therapy to your life can be helpful amid all the craziness. It gives you the support you need and something to look forward to. Therapy is something that's been a positive addition to my life. I think it really helped me improve as a person, helps me deal with all of the craziness around me. And if you want to give therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option to try it. It's completely online, it's convenient, it's flexible. Answer a brief questionnaire, you're matched with a licensed therapist, you start improving your mental health. So find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/thenextlevel today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/thenextlevel. Okay. So when Kari Lake was touching me, for people that don't realize, the last Tuesday, we talked about this a little bit last week, but I was with Lake and Bannon, and the video of this was released over the weekend. The Bannon interview was released on the circus finale, which was awesome. People should watch it. And the Kari Lake interview was released by Kari Lake because it wasn't going to make the cutting room. It wasn't going to make, it was going to hit the cutting room floor. 30-minute episode, a lot of people to talk to. Circus also talked to Gretchen Whitmer, Donald Trump, others. It wasn't an interview with Donald Trump, but covered Donald Trump. And so Kari puts this out. And on her X feed, I own liberal journalists and never Trumpers. And then some of our friends, kind of cut a highlight package of it, including her touching me, where it didn't maybe look as good. But one of the things, so I wrote about this for the Triad today. I'm in for JVL, and one of the things that both the interview with Bannon and Lake made me think about was this question of where the GOP is going and whether you can actually become normal in a MAGA party, whether there's a path to a MAGA normie merger. Sonny, what do we used to call it? What do we it's not integralism.
Fusionism?
What do we used to call it when the libertarians and the social conservative fusionism? Thank you.
Fusionism. Yeah.
Fusionism. Can we have a MAGA normie fusionism? Or is there something fundamentally crazy about MAGA? And what's prompted this was in the Kari interview, you could tell she was trying very hard to like be a normal politician for half the time. It was not like my last interview with Kari, where she starts yelling at me immediately. Like she was going back to talking points. She was talking about pocketbook issues and fentanyl. And when I asked her about election fraud, she was kind of discussing the more normal concerns about it, long lines, like she wasn't doing the Chinese bamboo ballot thing anymore, right? Like she was pivoting back to a more relatively for her, right? Like, or, some facsimile of a normal politician. And then over the course of the 15 minutes, that started to degrade her ability to be normal. And so, and after the interview, I was making this observation, and a couple of my friends in Arizona sent me articles about how she's been actually trying to cozy up to the McCain wing and saying to them privately that she's going to, soften the edges and become more moderate. But the fact that by the end of the interview, she was making fun of my pearls and saying I was not a manly man and all that makes me wonder if like that's not really possible for her. Right. And so I was using this as like this kind of thought experiment about the broader movement. Like, is there something, does MAGA voters just require you to be weird and extreme and conspiratorial and mean because that's what the voters like? And so a nice, a softer version of MAGA doesn't exist? Or might somebody else be able to do it and it's just not in Kari Lake's constitution? What do you guys think? What say you?
Well, I mean, I think owning the libs is foundational to the MAGA creed, right? I mean, like that is like the A number one thing. It's not necessarily like, I don't know, man. I don't think supporting Donald Trump is a thing you do because you're really into the various policies he has, right? You support Donald Trump because he's a showman and because he wants to hurt the people you don't like. He wants to hurt the people you feel have been hurting you, right? Like that's what his entire appeal is. And I don't really think like, we're going to talk about Tim Scott here in a minute, but like a guy like Tim Scott, that is not his MO. His whole MO is being like a reasonable guy who has like fairly straightforward conservative opinions. And when he tries to do the MAGA dance where he's, it doesn't work. It's phony. It's phony. People don't like phoniness. And Kari Lake is like Donald Trump, kind of crazy just naturally. And there's something that appeals to people about that sort of mask off, no veneer of reasonableness. It certainly appeals to a plurality of GOP primary voters. It's the foundational tenet of MAGA-ism. And there is no fusionism. There is surrender. There's surrender, but there is no fusionist. And this is why DeSantis continues to poll at 10 or 12% or whatever, right? Like he is the reasonable MAGA guy, right? That is like his whole brand. He's like, I'm effective Donald Trump. People don't want effective Donald Trump. They want Donald Trump.
Sarah, I want your take on this while you take a drink. One example of a fusionist possibility is the new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Just as we were coming on air today, he officially endorsed Donald Trump, which shouldn't be a big surprise, but I guess it is kind of surprising since like the last Speaker of the House talked about how Donald Trump tried a coup on the House floor, and like the next Speaker of the House is now endorsing him while there's still other options in the field. But
to be clear, the former speaker also would have endorsed him.
Yeah, sure. I'm just saying we've come a long way since 2021. It's not a point I like to bring up occasionally. But so what say you? Is it because they're trying this with Mike Johnson, right? I mean, now Mike Johnson has some other issues like all of his weird socially conservative stuff, right? But like the question is like, is it doable? Do we have a scary Frankenstein monster MAGA coming in the future who can kind of appeal in the suburbs, but also does all the anti-immigrant, tough on crime? Or is it just like, it's just so essentially owning the libs, as Sonny says, owning the libs is such an essential part of the creed that like, and being anti-elite is such an essential part of the creed that isn't doable.
Yeah, so you had a line in the trend that nobody's seen about like, will they learn to use the doorknobs? Right, which I think is like a Jurassic Park reference, which I love.
Which was from 1993. As soon as I wrote it, I'm like, God, I'm like the old guy that I used to make fun of that like makes all the references about 1980s movie. Anyway, sorry.
I loved it because I got it immediately. But I think the question is, and this is where Kari Lake is different from like a Herschel Walker, or where a Dan McCormick or Dave McCormick might be different from, I don't know, give me another MAGA person who can't control
Doug
Lake
Mastriano.
Masters or Doug Mastriano, right? So there is a way to thread this needle, and our bifurcated media environment does give people the opportunity to let their freak flag fly in the places where they need it to fly, and then be slightly more normal. Like Kari Lake knew when she was talking to you, she was testing out the normal Kari Lake. Now, I bet there's other environments where she's not that version of Kari Lake. And there, if you recall, Donald Trump had a brief stint, and I can't remember if it was before he got COVID and had that Luna just absolutely insane debate with Joe Biden, or if it was after. But there was this point at which everybody was like, he seems much more disciplined, right? Like when he had a campaign and he started behaving like a normal person, and then it like fell apart. I do think that there is an element of being able to figure out how to talk to the different audiences in the Republican Party. There has always been a pivot that people make from a primary to a general election. And I think that the media environment now is so fractured that it's possible, if you are a talented politician, like Kari Lake is, that you can work that to your advantage. I would say the counterpoint to that, though, is 2022, where part of what happened is by the time the primary was over, they were pretty, like, for a lot of people, the stuff that they said, like Tudor Dixon saying that a 12-year-old girl who was raped should have to carry the baby to term, like, everybody remembered that. Like, it was baked in from the primary. And so I guess that's the question. But I could see how talented politicians could do it. I'm just not sure there's a lot of people that are as good as Kari Lake.
Well, but to your point, though, on the bifurcated media environment, we also live in an environment where nothing ever goes away. There's no, you can't have that soundbite
Right.
on Bannon's show and not have it thrown at you 100 times in the general. I mean, maybe you get into the real fever swamps, the podcast where like the trackers aren't, but like I just don't see, I don't see how you can thread that needle and maintain plausible deniability in the general.
Yeah, I mean, there are two models. And so the second one is Tim Scott. The first one is like, so there is this, I am a normie Republican. I am actually normal, and I'm trying to do the MAGA cosplay. Like, that's one option. We've seen that doesn't work. The other option that I do wonder if, but this person doesn't exist. So maybe this is a white whale, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about is I am MAGA in my soul. Right, like I actually, the things that I actually care about are, you know, strong border. I don't think that we should be, you know, doing overseas adventurism. I'm anti-free trade, and like these are, and I'm anti-woke, and like these are things that I genuinely care about. I actually don't care about all the other stuff that much, and so I, you know, maybe they can kind of grow them, like this person up through the system, who is like a normal, I went to an Ivy League school and I actually care about this stuff. And then in the future, that person can run and they don't have to dabble in the crazy stuff, you know, because they exude MAGA in the way that they talk about issues. But even then, part of me thinks, and that's what I wrote, is that like, I just think that it might be the case that fundamentally the MAGA people want somebody that's a little crazy. Right, like, and then an anodyne no matter how authentic it is, an anodyne version is just going to be more boring. The Trump show isn't going to be there. You know, the libs aren't going to be quite as mad at them. You know, like the tears aren't going to be as delicious, and that person would end up just getting beat by somebody that outflanks them.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens when Trump is no longer around. Because it will create a vacuum. Yes, I know, dies. But I'm like you. I'm not wishing that on anybody. I don't. But it I think, and you'd be surprised how many rooms you're in where like that's the plan. The plan is like we should not be trying to defeat this. It's like you have to wait until he dies because
Republican rooms or Democratic rooms, or what do you mean rooms?
I would just say rooms where people are thinking about what a post-Trump world looks like. There's a real admission that the post-Trump world, Trump literally has to be gone. Like you don't, as long as Trump's around, you don't beat it. He has to be he has to be off the scene entirely. Because the cultish element, right? It's not tied to an ideology, it's tied to a person. So somebody else can embody both the crazy and sort of the make America great, America first policy deal, but none of them are Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thought experiment. What we know doesn't work is being a nice person that pretends that they are a MAGA person, which brings us to the great donor class hope, Tim Scott, who officially dropped out of the race this week. Here is my view on Tim Scott. Why did anybody ever think that this was going to work? Like, I think that what we just were talking about is an interesting thought experiment. Like, could JD Vance work? I don't know. Yeah. Maybe not. Maybe, right? Like that, I think that's an interesting thing to think about. Is a kinder, gentler Trump something people might want if they also feel like they're of the Trump mold? That's a maybe. I think that I could hear both sides of that argument. Could a Tim Scott work? Obviously no. Which is something we've been telling you on this podcast for a year. Finally, Tim Scott came to terms with that. I think it was kind of interesting that he came to terms with it right after he had his Canadian girlfriend reveal. It makes the whole thing feel really kind of creepy and weird to me. I don't know. I don't know. Like Mindy, why she went along with this. Good luck out there, Mindy. But anyway, what did do you guys? We can just move on to our final segment if you guys don't have anything to add. But do you have any eulogizing to do for Tim Scott?
Well, Tim, you said right at the top of the show that Tim Scott is not a Block A topic, and he's not a Block A candidate. He doesn't. There's no. I don't know. Tim Scott maybe had a path in 2012 or 2008. As that kind of Republican. It doesn't exist in the GOP as it's currently constituted. He just looked uncomfortable and kind of phony out there when he was trying to, as we were discussing, thread the MAGA normie GOP needle. He looked uncomfortable. That's just kind of what it comes down to.
Sarah, I guess the one interesting thing that would be worth getting your opinion on is I've heard some chatter since he dropped out that it's good news for Nikki Haley. Tim Scott's dropping out. His vote share of 2% is going to go to her. That's going to help her momentum. What do you think? Nikki Haley, is she happy this morning in Bamberg?
She is happy. No, she is. Every single one of these people that drops out allows her. It's not just the meager vote share coming her way. It's more just like attention for her. She is fighting to emerge in a one-on-one battle with Donald Trump, right? And, I continue to think that's a hopeless endeavor, but a worthwhile one nonetheless. And I'm much prefer it to be her than Ron DeSantis. And right now, Ron DeSantis is splitting off, move on from Trumpers from Trump. But she is consolidating the normie vote. And so everyone that drops out is good. I just want to say about Tim Scott, it's a good lesson for candidates that look good on paper. There was a lot about Tim Scott that if you just considered him, his history, his bio, that you could be like, oh, I can totally see this. And people did like him. This was one of the things Trey Gowdy seemed actually sort of caught off guard when Tim Scott dropped out on his show. And he kept saying, but you had the highest positive rating from voters. They don't hate Tim Scott, right? They think he's nice, and they don't hate Nikki Haley. They just don't want them. And this is the thing that I think is an interesting thing to tease out, which is it's not that they hate Mike Pence. They hate Chris Christie. They don't hate Tim Scott. They want to belong to a party that has Tim Scott's in it, right? For a variety of reasons. But they don't want Tim Scott to be the president.
I do have a little bit of bad news. For Nikki Haley on this front. The Tim Scott second choice numbers for who his candidates in Iowa. So he had 7% in Iowa. But there was not a single person that got above 30. It was Trump, DeSantis, and Haley were all between 20 and 30. And unsure was the remaining quarter. So broke down basically evenly. Not great, Bob. Okay, speaking of not great, Bob, I want to close by really uplifting people. And maybe you can think about something, Sarah, just because you bring the sunshine to this podcast and you love being touched so much by Kari Lake, and just all of your feelings. I haven't thought about a positive send off because we're going to go down into the dark place right now. So maybe think about something. Think about something nice to say at the very end.
Okay, great.
Charlie had a newsletter yesterday. I don't know if you read Charlie Sykes' Morning Shots. It's a good newsletter. It comes out every day. And it was about the plans that Donald Trump has put forth. And this was some of what I talked about with Steve Bannon last week. I listed out, that 5-point Mike Davis plan of eradicating the deep state and indicting the Bidens and deporting 20 million people and releasing the January 6th prisoners and reopening Gitmo. Bannon was all on board for all 5 points of that 5-point plan. Charlie brings up some other plans, read some reports from John Swan and others at the New York Times. One of them that jumped out to me, former President Donald Trump is planning an extreme expansion of his first-term crackdown on immigration, including preparing to round up people living in the United States without legal permission on a vast scale and detain them in sprawling camps while they wait to be expelled. That sounds bad. They want to follow the, quote, Eisenhower model, which is just a not very subtle, nice way to call back Operation Wetback, which was a past effort to expel Hispanic in the country. Other things to speed mass deportations, redirect the military budget, DOJ targeting political enemies. So, not great. I guess my main question is, I don't think that we need to belabor much time, unless, Sonny, feel free, I don't want to speak for you, in saying that all of us are horrified and appalled by the potential plans that Donald Trump has in a second term. My main question for this is, Charlie's thesis was it's the plans, not the gaffes, that matter. And I think obviously that is true substantively, that it's his plans that are more important than him saying vermin or whatever, which, as gross as that is, or mixing up Biden with Obama is maybe a better example. But for me, I wonder if politically the plans, not the gaffes, also are more salient, because I'm just not sure this has sunk in with people yet. And maybe there can be a case that is made. So, Sarah, I want to start with you.
So when you say it hasn't sunk in yet, so I talk about this from the focus groups all the time. The fact is, voters have not yet grasped that it is going to be Biden versus Trump. In all cases across the board, people still seem to think something's going to happen, maybe Trump goes to jail, or maybe someone else is going to be there instead of Biden. They just haven't fully clocked the idea that it's going to be a rematch. And I think that as a result, Trump is getting a big pass right now from people. They're just not super engaged in the crazy stuff that he's doing. I do think, I just want that. So that part is right.
Okay, but what about the part of in some ways, is this new information, right? The way I think about this is that Trump saying crazy stuff at a rally, I think we should publicize that. That people know, they know that he's going to say crazy stuff. Is it new information for voters that might move some of them when they actually hear the details of his plans?
Yeah. But here's the thing. Here's what the people who are focusing on the gaps. There's a reason the gaps are getting focused on by the Biden administration. It's the same thing that the right is doing with Hunter Biden. They need to make an equivalency argument on mental acuity with Biden, right? And they think that the biggest vulnerability for Biden is the fact that people do not see him as up to the job and mentally sharp. And so they really need to even that out with Trump is also not mentally sharp. And I think at this juncture, that's not a terrible thing to do, because voters are not yet really read in on the idea that it's going to be Trump. You do need to, because one of the things I talk about a lot with the focus groups is voters oftentimes, this was true in 2022, they didn't really clock the idea that the behavior from these candidates were anti-democratic or a threat. They just thought they were nuts. And I think it's good for people to paint Trump as nuts as he comes into this. And then as it becomes clearer, really outline all the insane things that he wants to do.
Dark Sunny, do you think maybe the mass deportation plan in the camps is a positive, and so maybe that's not actually politically helpful at all?
I would say it's rarely a net positive for your campaign when something you have planned or said you want to do is described as sprawling camps. I feel like sprawling camps is like people are like, what, sprawling camps?
Maybe
nice
in
and
theory
tidy
they're
little
like,
camps.
yes, I'm for deportations. Then once they hear about sprawling camps,
well, no,
they're
this
like,
is.
whoa.
I think this is actually true, though. I think this is true that I think people, if you ask them, should people who are in the country illegally be deported, is a fairly straightforward law and order question. People are like, yeah, if you're here illegally, get out, whatever. If you phrase it as, we are going to round up all of the people who we suspect to be here illegally, and we're going to put them in a series of interlocking, sprawling camps throughout the country, and it's going to be like an archipelago of, and like, I don't think that's I think that's a bad thing if people understand the phrase archipelago. But
it's just a word. I don't think that's a phrase. Archipelago, I think it's a single.
Well, I'm referencing the Gulag Archipelago. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Point is, I think that frankly, I think the gaffes help him in the primary because the whole point of, again, this goes back to what I was saying before. It's baked into the whole Trump appeal. He is Trump the showman, being crazy, ridiculous. Like, I'll just say whatever comes off the top of my head. He will, at some point in the primary, talk about the sprawling camps. Be like, guys, should we have sprawling camps? And people will be like, yes, sprawling camps. We should have, and because that's what people want from Donald Trump. And like, I think that actually, I think Charlie is absolutely right that the important thing are the actual policy things that will be undertaken by Donald Trump. But the thing I do worry about is moving the Overton window to the point where people are like, yeah, sure, big giant camps full of illegal immigrants. Of course, that's fine. We don't I think that is bad, and I think that is largely driven by the kind of Trump propensity for. They're not gaffes. I mean, that's the other thing, is that they're not actually gaffes. It's just like, it's just him. This is him. This is the thing. And this is why I get so depressed when I look at the polling numbers. It's like, well, this is what a clear plurality and probably a majority of the GOP electorate wants.
Yeah, I worry about the Overton window moving too. My only other observation on this, and is it kind of moves away from the political to the practical, is even within me, I sometimes look at these things and I'm like, they're not really going to do that. I know, there's most of my brain knows, and I fucking had to sit across from all of Bannon's 3 shirts, right? Like, I know what they want to do, and I know that they will do it if they can. But he was just so incompetent in the first administration that little, and then the little optimistic, hopeful part of your brain comes in. It's like, they won't. That's not really going to be like that. I do think that's human nature. And I think that there has to be a really concerted effort to expose this over and over again and to drive into people's heads how different it will be. Because the staffing of the next administration, I know that's not the politically salient issue, but the staffing is going to be different, and it's going to be hard for them to find people. And that means that at the bottom of the barrel, even like when I asked Bannon in that interview, like, who's going to be in the cabinet? Like, the names he came up with were like preposterous, and part of the reason why they're preposterous is that there aren't good names, which takes us back to that there is no normal MAGA. You know what I mean? There aren't a lot of good options, and so anyway, I do think that undergirds all of this, Sarah.
Yeah, but here's so take just Schedule F for an example. So this is the one where because Trump keeps talking about this, I'm going to implement Schedule F as a first order thing. That is where they're basically clearing out a bunch of the civil servants. And actually what he's doing by saying that is because they know they don't want there will be quitting en masse of civil servants, right? So part of it too is to be like, yeah, well, they're like, we're going to head off this sort of walking out of the government. But that means they're going to put, when you say incompetent, that's true. Like, you don't have to be that competent to completely burn things down. You have to be competent to build things. Right? You have to be competent to preserve things. You do not have to be competent to burn it down. And I think that's where this is going.
Well, that's an uplifting close. It's been a really good, positive show, a long show. Sarah, how are you feeling? Do you have any nerves? You've got a big speech, I heard. you got to do?
So I got to do my TED Talk tomorrow. And if you can't tell from this podcast, I am a smidge on the sick side. So I got to play hurt, number one. Number two, I don't know if you've ever tried to memorize a 12-minute speech, but it is really hard. And also, I'm not good at it. Like, you know me, I like to talk off the cuff and riff, and I need the interaction.
Yeah.
But just like talking straight for 12 minutes, it is a disaster. So if, you guys out there want to just send me some positive vibes tomorrow, I would appreciate it. So I don't blank on stage in front of hundreds of people and then millions of people down the road when they release it. I would appreciate it. I got to go talk about focus groups and democracy. I'm going to do my best.
I will send you positive vibes,
sending
positive vibes to our absent co-host JVL and to loyal reader.
Send more love to him.
Yeah, and to our loyal reader, Michelle Ebersman. Michelle, I'm thinking about you. We have on Sunday Scott Galloway from the Pivot Pod. I taped it yesterday, so it's already in the can. And it was really great. And he brought out kind of my inner Sonny. Like Scott is a little bit of a heterodox kind of thinker, and he's a Democrat and he's a liberal, but on various issues, because we got outside of the Trump bad talking points, because he actually is a very substantive person who can kind of talk about every fucking thing under the sun, and so we got into a lot of issues. So I don't know, so I got to kind of let my free market flag fly a couple times during the podcast. He has a great bit on higher education and about the problems with young men in society. So anyway, I think you'll enjoy that with Scott Galloway on Sunday. Sarah, I think me and you might be doing Secret on Friday. We'll see. A little teaser. Or maybe not.
See you in new bud.
I don't know. Yeah.
I would just like to reiterate to close that it is funny. I had not thought about it, that the three of us used to work together. Yeah. Like back in the day. We all worked in the same place. Were we all in the office at the same time?
Tim was gone from Burma.
I thought we had a 2-week overlap. No,
I don't think. No,
we were just ships passing in the night.
You came by the office a fair amount, I think, still, or we would say happy hours. So I think there was still.
Yeah, we've all come a long way. We all look
people
pretty good.
People don't realize, yeah.
We all look pretty good. Guys, thanks so much for being with you. We'll see you on we'll see you on Thursday night if you're in DC. Otherwise, we'll see you on Friday. And I don't know how JVL usually closes out this show. Peace.